The water is almost perfectly still. A crocodile lies half submerged beneath the surface, only its eyes and the ridgeline of its back visible above the river. Somewhere nearby, insects move through the reeds. A fish breaks the surface for less than a second and disappears again. It looks like an ordinary morning, but imagine that this river existed 66 million years ago. What if the sky suddenly turned dark for months? What if the plants disappeared, the temperature collapsed, and almost every large animal around you began to die? And what if, somehow, you simply waited beneath the water until it was over? That is the strange story written into the bones of crocodiles. Because when the asteroid struck Earth, the dinosaurs disappeared, but the crocodile lineage did not. The question is not simply how they survived. The stranger question is why something that looks so ancient was prepared for a world that was about to become almost unrecognizable. Picture Earth on the final day of the Cretaceous. Forests cover enormous regions. Dinosaurs dominate the land. Giant reptiles move through rivers and seas. The planet is warm, green, and crowded with life. Then, near what is now Mexico's Yucatán Peninsula, an asteroid roughly 10 kilometers across crashes into Earth. The Chicxulub impact releases unimaginable energy. Dust and debris rise into the atmosphere. Wildfires spread, sunlight is blocked, temperatures plunge, while food chains begin collapsing from the bottom upward. But here's where it gets strange. The animals that survive are not necessarily the strongest. They are not necessarily the fastest. They are not necessarily the most intelligent. Sometimes survival belongs to the animal that can simply need less. So what happened to the crocodiles? For decades, scientists noticed something remarkable in the fossil record. Crocodilian relatives existed on both sides of the extinction boundary, while many other large reptiles vanished. But this did not mean every crocodilian survived. Some lineages disappeared too, and recent fossil research shows that crocodilians suffered losses around the boundary. So perhaps the mystery was never, why did crocodiles survive? Perhaps it was, what kind of crocodile could survive? And that question changes everything. Imagine two animals facing the same disaster. One has a furnace inside its body, constantly demanding energy. The other moves slowly, spends long periods resting, and can survive on surprisingly little food. Now remove sunlight. Plants begin dying. Herbivores begin starving. Predators lose their prey. What happens to an animal that needs enormous amounts of energy just to keep its body running? And what happens to one that can wait? Modern crocodilians are ectothermic, meaning their body temperature depends heavily on their environment rather than being maintained by producing large amounts of internal heat. That does not make them primitive. It makes them economical. A crocodile can spend hours almost motionless. It can slow its activity dramatically. It does not need to chase food every few minutes simply to keep its metabolism operating. And scientists have spent decades trying to understand how deep that metabolic story goes. A 2024 review of crocodilian relatives examined evidence from anatomy, fossil bone structure, isotopes, and evolutionary history, showing that the metabolic story of crocodilians is far more complicated than the simple image of a slow reptile. But if low energy demand was the secret, another mystery appears. Why didn't everything with a low metabolism survive? Because energy was only one piece of the puzzle. Imagine the world after the impact. The sky is dim. Trees are dying. Huge herbivores have nothing to eat. The predators that depended on those herbivores are next. But a river is different. A river carries something the dying forest still has in abundance. Dead organic material. Leaves fall. Roots decay. Animals die. Tiny organisms consume the remains. Insects feed on them. Small aquatic animals feed on the insects. Fish feed on the small animals. And suddenly the river has a food web that does not depend entirely on living forests in the same way a terrestrial food chain does. This possibility became central to research into the extinction. A study examining global climate change and soot at the KPG boundary proposed that freshwater ecosystems could have been buffered by food webs built partly around plant detritus rather than fresh vegetation alone, helping crocodilians and other freshwater animals endure the collapse. But here's the twist. The crocodile did not need the world to remain healthy. It only needed the world to remain barely alive. And perhaps that is why the river mattered so much. A crocodile does not have to win against the apocalypse, it only has to lose more slowly than everything around it. But now consider temperature, because there is a cruel irony here. Crocodiles love warmth. Their modern distribution is strongly constrained by temperature, and standing water can provide an important thermal buffer against temperature extremes. A major paleoclimate study using crocodilian fossils found temperature to be one of the principal influences on their distribution through deep time. So if the impact caused dramatic cooling, why didn't that kill them too? This is where everything changes. The same animal that depends on warmth also has access to something enormous animals on land do not have as easily: water. Water changes temperature more slowly than air. A river does not instantly become the temperature of the sky above it. A pond can become a refuge. A burrow can become a refuge. Mud can become a refuge. And suddenly the crocodile's weakness becomes part of its protection. It does not need to maintain a constant internal temperature like a mammal or bird. It can retreat into an environment that changes more slowly. But there is another problem. Even if you survive the cold, what do you eat? This is where the crocodile's mouth becomes more interesting than its armor. A crocodile is often imagined as a specialist predator. But living crocodilians are remarkably flexible feeders. They can consume fish, birds, mammals, reptiles, amphibians, insects, carrion, and whatever else their environment makes available. And this flexibility may stretch far deeper into their evolutionary history. A 2025 study of crocodylomorph evolution found that semi-aquatic generalists persisted through the end Cretaceous extinction and suggested that dietary flexibility was one important feature associated with long-term resilience. Think about what that means. If one food disappears, the crocodile does not necessarily disappear with it. If fish becomes scarce, something else might be available. If hunting becomes difficult, scavenging becomes possible. If the world offers almost nothing, a low-energy animal can wait longer for the next opportunity. And now we reach the most uncomfortable part of the story. The crocodiles were not simply lucky, but they were not perfectly adapted to disaster either. They were something stranger. They were adaptable enough. The fossil record shows that crocodilians and their relatives were once astonishingly diverse. There were terrestrial forms, marine forms, herbivorous forms, giant predators, and animals unlike the crocodiles alive today. More than 500 extinct pseudosuchian species are known from the fossil record, while fewer than 30 crocodilian species survive today. So when we say crocodiles survived, we are quietly hiding a tragedy. The lineage survived. Many of its relatives did not. The winners of evolution are often surrounded by invisible cemeteries. And perhaps that is the part we misunderstand when we look at an ancient animal and call it a living fossil. It was never frozen in time. It was changing. Its relatives were disappearing. Its environments were shifting. Its body was being tested by millions of years of climate change, competition, drought, sea level changes, and extinction. The crocodile we see today is not the same animal that lived beside dinosaurs. It is the survivor of a much larger family. And this becomes even more fascinating when scientists zoom out. A 2015 analysis of roughly 250 million years of pseudosuchian history found strong relationships between climate and biodiversity, showing that crocodilian relatives repeatedly expanded during warm periods and declined as environments became colder or more arid. So perhaps surviving one apocalypse was not the real achievement. Perhaps the real achievement was surviving hundreds of millions of years of smaller ones. A changing planet, a disappearing coastline, a drying river, a colder winter, a new predator, a new competitor. Again and again, the question was the same. Can you change faster than the world around you? And now the mystery becomes strangely personal, because humans tend to imagine survival as strength. We admire the animal with the biggest teeth, the fastest legs, the largest brain, the most sophisticated weapon. But mass extinctions tell a different story. When the rules suddenly change, advantages can become liabilities. Being huge requires enormous amounts of food. Being specialized can become dangerous when your one food source disappears. Being fast does not help if there is nowhere to run. Sometimes survival belongs to the organism that can tolerate uncertainty. The crocodile did not defeat the asteroid. It did not outsmart the extinction. It did not protect the dinosaurs. It simply occupied a biological strategy that happened to remain possible when almost everything else became impossible. And that may be the deepest answer hidden in this ancient story. The crocodile survived because several traits happened to intersect at exactly the right moment. Low energy demands, aquatic habitats, flexible diets, tolerance for long periods without food, and an ecology capable of functioning even when sunlight and living vegetation were collapsing. But notice the wording. Not because it was destined to survive. Because it happened to fit. That distinction matters, because 66 million years ago, the crocodile was not guaranteed a future. The Earth did not choose it. Evolution did not know the asteroid was coming. There was no plan, no promise. Only countless generations of organisms meeting the world as it was, one environmental crisis after another. And eventually, one lineage was still there. Today, when a crocodile lies motionless beneath a warm river surface, it can look almost unchanged from another age. But perhaps that stillness is deceptive. Behind those eyes is not a creature that escaped time. It is a creature that endured it. And somewhere beneath the silence of that river is a lesson written over 66 million years ago. When the world changes suddenly, survival may not belong to the strongest. It may belong to the one that can wait. And if that is true for a crocodile, what does it say about us? Living on a planet that is changing faster than we would like to admit?